Lane Kiffin strikes again.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back into Locked On Ole Miss. I am Brian Smith in for Stephen Willis, and we have a special edition for you on this Tuesday as Lane Kiffin strikes again, this time with the transfer portal quarterback. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Yes, indeed. Lane Kiffin has struck again. In this special edition of Locked On Ole Miss, I want to break down Trinidad Chambliss out of Ferris State, which is in the state of Michigan, Division II national champions. He certainly was a catalyst in their entire season. When you account for over 50 touchdowns, I don't care what level you play at, you're a ball player. Trinidad Chambliss, 6'1", 200 pounds. Here are his stats last year: 2,925 yards and 26 touchdowns through the air. But just as importantly, because it makes it so hard to defend, 1,019 yards and another 25 scores on the ground. How does this impact Ole Miss? I have as many questions as you do, and I'm just now beginning to digest this, so I honestly don't have a full thought process. I'll discuss it more on the Wednesday podcast here at Locked On Ole Miss, but for now, I just wanted to announce it, kind of give some thoughts about why this is important overall for the Ole Miss football program as a whole, and then it's kind of a reckoning point with the Southeastern Conference. Think about last year in the SEC. Georgia quarterback play was all over the map. Alabama, good Lord, that was definitely not what you expect out of Alabama. Even LSU, while they had a good quarterback, he was still erratic, cost them in some big games. Texas, they got to the Final Four, but did the quarterback live up to his expectations? No. Quinn Ewers probably came up a little short. Florida finally kind of found a quarterback, but Did Nico find his niche? No, and now he's in the transfer portal. It's been a wild year. Jackson Dart might have been the most consistent of those quarterbacks, and you could make arguments for other guys too, but the league was down a little bit. Now you have a scenario where the depth chart at Ole Miss is not just good at quarterback. I would argue overall that Ole Miss has the best quarterback room now that Trinidad Chambliss has been added, because you got Austin Simmons. It's probably going to be your starter, barring something extremely surprising. Pierce Clarkson comes over from Louisville. He was a highly recruited player from California. You got A.J. Maddox, who banged up his hand this spring, but he's a player that's very talented as well. He's a redshirt freshman. And again, you add a stud in Trinidad Chambliss. Like no other team in college football, arguably, has as much overall talent. You at least got to put the Rebs in that conversation because they've got guys that have played. They've got guys that were highly recruited. They've got guys that have big arms. They've got mobility. They've got a little bit of everything. Now the question is, how do you look at it because they don't have a returning starter? Well, that's the other reason I think that you bring him in. Lane Kiffin's not stupid. He knows that Austin Simmons is a special talent, but it's still not a lock by any account that he will be that guy for 12 consecutive weeks, get you into the playoff and make a run. And even if he is, you have to worry about injuries. And again, Maddox hurt his hand this spring. Maybe he's somebody that's ready to go in the fall if he has to be called on. I don't know. But if you add another player that's been in college for 3 years, has another year to play, that's this talented. Again, he had 51 touchdowns this last year, talking about Trinidad Chambliss. There's no reason to think that Ole Miss isn't positioned to take on any kind of defense and has the depth to compete with anybody as well. Congrats to them. They found another player to come in, and although he's not a guaranteed starter, he's not guaranteed anything, they get him to come down from the state of Michigan and Ferris State to join the Rebels football program. I'm a little surprised, but I think, again, this puts the SEC on notice. How many teams have this kind of depth? Look at Tennessee's depth chart. They got Jake Merklinger, who I think had 9 snaps last year, and a redshirt, and a guy that's just early enrolled. That's the only 2 scholarship quarterbacks they had. Tennessee. Compare that to what Ole Miss has, quite different. Even Texas doesn't have the consistency even though they got Arch. He hasn't played a ton, and behind him, there's nothing that's proven at all, and they're probably not quite as versatile either. So again, if you want to put a record out there of, okay, this school has starter back, that's fine, but 1 through 4, how many teams have as good a quarterback as the Rebels? It'll be interesting to see how many play this season, but I think it's really fascinating that Ole Miss has found another player like this, because you're just not going to get that many guys to come into a depth chart where they're not going to start. This guy just won a Division II national title. He probably could have went to North Carolina and been the starter, but he chose Lane Kiffin. It's really, really wild. But that's the transfer portal era, and we'll be talking more about this, including, ironically enough, Lane Kiffin also scored a high school quarterback that I'll be talking about on Wednesday's show. That's something that is really wild because it's a kid that I didn't know they were really hard after, but he's from a prominent program. We'll talk about that on Wednesday's show here at Locked On Ole Miss. This has been a lot of fun for me already, standing in for Stephen Willis, and I really enjoy it. I hope everybody enjoys these podcasts because I know I do, and I look forward to doing them until Stephen comes back because it's a really good time. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen each and every day. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Odyssey, SportsBiter, any place you can imagine that has a podcasting app. We're there. Make sure you check out Locked On Ole Miss. And thanks again to Stephen Willis for allowing me to host this show while he is out. We will see you all again on Wednesday.